Hey everybody, welcome back to Conquest of Aya. It's been a couple weeks since I put out a video, but I finally have time to sit down and go over character focus for the Old Dominion, which I'm actually starting to play now, in the Xiliarch. So Bellum's also just updated the core rules a little bit with some minor FAQs, things like clearing up charging, changing how shooting works but on a per stand basis. Aura Death no longer calls Resolve, which is kind of big for Old Dominion in particular. But there's other YouTube channels that are going over all of these changes, and you can just go over and on Bellum's website and read the changes and kind of the developers' thoughts behind them. I like all the changes. I think it's all for the good. I just think it's too early to start talking about them now until we see the changes to the actual armies as well, to see what this means as a whole for the game. Because they kind of said in the Aura Death preview, not to worry, Aura Death not causing Resolve kind of seemed to make it way, way weaker. But they said some of the Aura Death values are going to start to go up. So I take that to mean that some of the army rules are also going to change as they do this balance pass. So I also want to say I really like that this is the approach Bellum's taken to balancing the game. Normally I would say that this seems kind of fast, and I've heard some of the players in my meta say this is kind of fast. But I think the way Bellum is doing it, where it's just updated on a PDF for free, all you have to do is look at it on your phone, print out a new copy of it if you print out the copy, then you're good to go. I think these updates are only good for the game and make the game more balanced and fun on the whole. I would feel way differently if this was like Games Workshop and I had to buy a $50 rulebook, and then the same day as like my buddy that played Drakari, he bought his new codex, and the same day a supplement came out that he needed as well. That feels bad. But the way that Bellum does it, with just releasing the PDF rules and even giving you like their thoughts in an FAQ, like here's why we did this and this is our intent, and the developers are in the Discord, which is, if you haven't joined the Discord, it's awesome. Go check out their website again, that'll link you to the Discord, where they like respond to players, which is awesome. And some of this is that it's a smaller game still, so they have that luxury to really be engaged with their community. But other smaller games, there's other smaller games out there, and their developers are not engaged at all with their community. So I really like what Bellum's doing. I like the rules updates, and I can't wait to play my first few games with them. So I have played a couple games with Old Dominion, that is the army I'm just now starting. And I played 100 Kingdoms right when I first got into the game, which is pretty fun. Then I moved over to my Spires, because I just had 100 Kingdoms and Spires army just from buying the starter sets, and like I figured, why not? It's in the starter set, I'm just going to have these two armies. It's not that expensive, the way that Bellum has the regiments and stuff. So I had a lot of fun playing the Spires. I would say I like the Spires more than the 100 Kingdom because of just like the combinations you can make and the things, the biomancies and ferromancies you can do. It makes you feel like a real smart person if you get them right, or real dumb sometimes, like if I mess them up. So then I always have loved like the Old Dominion look, like that undead Roman legion feel, and their backstory is really cool, where they all just were super devoted to Xiliarch, but Xiliarch's going a little crazy and some people saw it and got out of there. But these guys were the super devoted ones who were like, no, Xiliarch's our god, we're sticking around, we don't care if he is turning us all, he seems to be going crazy and killing a lot of people, and then he'll raise us from the dead and it's all good. So I played my first couple of games, 1,500 points against my buddies Nords, and I think I found my faction for Conquest. I just love that there seems to be different play styles. I just have enough models right now to kind of do one play style, but like you could build the Aura Death build, which who knows if that's going to be good here. We'll see with the new army rules. They have really good hard-hitting units now. The Varangian Guard, the Praetorian Guard are also really hard-hitting. They're a little slow, so I don't know how fast you can make their army, but I just also really like the Memories of Old, because it kind of feels like Spires, where if you make everything work together in concert, it'll really shine on the tabletop. If you don't do that, as I found out in my first couple of games, you just have a lot of expensive pieces on the table that don't seem to do a lot for their cost, but you really need to use everything in concert to really make them worth that extra cost, because you're not taking Resolve, so that's built in obviously to the unit cost. So the Xiliarch, you can see is 90 points, which is pretty standard for an infantry character. Move 5, Clash 3 is pretty good. Attacks 5, wounds 5. No resolve because he's Old Dominion. And with a pretty low defense of 2, but still that 1 evasion, which, you know, you got that 16% chance to save anything that comes your way. Best of luck in a duel. He's built in with Cleave 1, which is always nice for a character. Animate Vessel with all of the Old Dominion have. Terrifying 1. And then now we start to get to the interesting stuff in his Supremacy ability. Obdurate Bone and Stone. I love saying that. So the army can reach Dark Power Tier 4, which we'll talk about in a second. Normally you can just get to Tier 3. And then that's always active, so you can always attempt to get to Tier 4 if you get enough of the Dark Power pool. And the next part here is the really cool part, which I didn't really think that was that good until I played a couple games with an Archimandrite as my warlord. And then I read this. So in addition, once per battle, the Xiliarch can activate the Supremacy ability during the Supremacy phase. And until the end of the round, all friendly measurements in his warband, so not your whole army, just his warband, which we'll take a look at in a second, can perform a free clash action, additional class action during their activation, and allows them to clash twice during a round. So if you're engaged with multiple things in your warband, you can, you know, if you're close enough, charge, clash. But what I think is even more interesting is just think of how many times playing any army in any game, you're like, man, I really want to move, charge, clash, but I can't. You have impact attacks on some things. But with this, and the units in his warband, will let you move, charge, and then clash, which Old Dominion is not the fastest army in the world, but that can really catch a lot of people off. You have a huge threat range now. It's doubled, basically, of other infantry armies, which I just think is so good. So let's take a look at his warband to see kind of what you get. I'm not going to look at the unreleased units. I mean, we don't really play with them in my meta, and there's no guarantee that those stats are going to stay the same once that unit actually comes out. So for mainstays, he's got Legionnaires, which, okay, that's cool. You're not going to take him in Legionnaires. You're probably going to take him in Praetorian Guard, or you're going to take as your mainstay Praetorian Guard. So this unit is just a super defensible and also can have some really high offensive output with some upgrades on the Xiliarch if he's in the unit, with attacks 5, wounds 5, defense 2 with a shield, so you're getting a 3, and then you can see their Memory's Vault is Bastion +1, not just 1. So as you get up that Dark Power pool, you can get these guys all the way up to defense 5 from the front arc, which is awesome. Their defense is kind of already built in with that Memories of Old, and while 5 attacks is pretty good, you can see that low clash of 2 is really going to hurt, because you're only going to get inspired on that charge if you get the charge off, because you can't take the inspired action as Old Dominion. But a Xiliarch going inside of them, he's already cleaved 1 with 5 attacks, so that's adding some offense. But if you take one of the treasures in, let's find it, Skofung, man, that's probably not how you say that, right? But this is on a sword, I assume. And you take this for 25 points on your Xiliarch, and it gives the character Cleave +1, so he's at Cleave 2, and it gives the entire regiment he's attached to Linebreaker. That's amazing. There's no better 25-point upgrade as far as offense, I think. I mean, in the game, maybe? Comment down below and let me know if there's a way to buff offensively other units, you know, in other armies like this. And Linebreaker lets you ignore the shield and bastion, all bastion, draw event when your unit clashes. So if you go into Dweghom and they have shield and they have their bastion up and they're defense 5, not anymore, they go down to defense 3, and you Praetorians, they don't have any cleave, but they have a bunch of attacks, and your Xiliarch has cleave too. And even against Dweghom, with that terrifying 1, when they're taking the resolve, you're going to do a lot more damage just for that 25 points of a weapon upgrade on the Xiliarch. Then we can look at a couple of the restricted options. The only 2 he has is the Varangian Guard we'll talk about first. I played with 3 stands of these in my game the other day at 1,500 points, and just them by themselves, I probably buy them a standard. They failed 2 3-inch charges in my game, so lesson learned, Eric. Buy a standard for your real expensive hammer units. They come in at 6 wounds, just 4 attacks, but they do have Clash 3, so, you know, even though they have the Animate Vessel special rule, you're hitting pretty well. And Defense 3 built in with Harden 1 and Cleave 2. So these guys have everything built into them to justify that 180 points cost. They hit hard, they have good defense with the amount of wounds they have and the hardened 1. And then as you can see the members of all, they have a choice of cleave +1 to get into cleave 3 or line breaker, and you can kind of pick depending on what you're hitting into. If you're in that tier 2, you get it as that draw event, and then, you know, as you even get up the higher tiers, you can do both of these to, you know, if you're playing Dwaycom again, they're not going to get any saves. So the Ringing Guard are really, really awesome. I don't think the Xiliarch really needs to go inside of these guys, because he can add some things to them, but they're really just good on their own. That they're the whole package by themselves. And last but not least, we have the Athanatoi, and these are restricted. They're your other elite infantry choice for the Xiliarch, and these guys have some interesting rules. Their main downside, they're 170 points, slightly cheaper than Ringing Guard, but their main downside is going to be their defensive stats. The Ringing Guard have everything built in. They're pretty defensive, very offensive. These guys just have defense 2, evasion 1, with nothing else. They have the Memory's Old counterattack, so if your opponent rolls 1s to hit them, they take hits back. But I mean, that's not really upping the defense of your guys. So these guys have 6 attacks to stand, which is awesome. Just a Clash 2, but with Flurry. They also have the Bodyguard special rule, which is pretty cool, so you can't really call it the Xiliarch in a duel. He can refuse duels and the unit doesn't become broken. I just worry if you put your Xiliarch in here, I mean, with that sword to give him line breaker, and it makes him very, very killy with the 6 attacks into some targets. But with how lethal everything is the game, especially how lethal shooting is, I just feel like this unit could get just absolutely destroyed just trying to march across the table. So we talked about the cool sword that the Xiliarch can take, but let's look at some of the other treasures that you might want to put on them, because you can take the 15-point mastery upgrade, kind of like 100 Kingdoms can, to give him 2 of these. So let's look at the banner first up here, that just your regiment that he's in always counts as inspired, which is really cool. You can't take the inspired action, but you can always count as inspired. So this can get your Praetorians up to Clash 3 basically all the time. Or the Vexilla of the Lost gives a regiment the flank special rule. A lot of the units in your army are going to be, you know, mediums and heavies, so getting that flank plus the 1 guarantee that you get can really help you against some armies like Wadroon, who have a lot of lights that are really fast that might, you know, start blocking you off from objectives early. It is 30 points, but if you find yourself playing a lot of those fast type armies, definitely look at this to get some units onto the board quicker and more reliably. As far as like the armors, I like the Aventine armor to give the regiment he's in Tenacious. Just ignoring 1 of your failed defense rolls is really good, especially in Praetorian Guard. Even, you know, if you put this on and throw them in the more elite unit with a ton of attacks, this can help up their defense a little bit, but I don't know if the points cost is really worth it. Then the Armor of the Living Saint gives the characters to him Blessed and Quicksilver Strike. For like 30 points, you can throw this armor on him with the Long Lineage, 15 points, and throw on the Giver of Mercy weapon, which gives him in a duel cleave 2 total, counterattack, parry, and +1 clash all the time. So if you really want the dueling Xiliarch, that's what you should go for. I know my Xiliarch, just with the sword, the Sofang sword, I know that's not how you pronounce it, but that's what I'm calling it, did get called out by my buddy's Cunning Gear multiple times in the game, because, you know, the Xiliarch's unit's pretty big and probably is going to be the centerpiece of your army and out there fighting on objectives, so you don't really want him called out in duels. And then last, we have the Brand of the Faithless weapon. And then, so each time an enemy regiment fails a defense roll, it counts the wound twice when they start testing for morale. Pair that with your Terrifying, that's obviously really, really awesome. And, you know, that's only 30 points. The Xiliarch's masteries are called Dark Blessings. So there's definitely a lot of different ways you can build the Xiliarch, and you can start to look here. For example, you have, we'll just start at the top with a Kentarch. Once you reach Dark Power Pool 2, everything within 8 inches is inspired, and you normally can't be inspired as Old Dominion. 8 inches is not super far in this game because your units are generally a little more spread out. So this could be, you know, his own unit, and then maybe one on either flank, which was pretty good just to up that clash value. It is 40 points, so it's pretty expensive. And your Xiliarch, he can be built to be, more of a beat stick than a buffing piece, in my opinion. The Aura Malice is also 40 points, and it just gives the unities in the Dread special rule, so your opponent can't inspire. I like this a lot too, but 40 points is a lot to spend, especially when you're going to start building up some of these upgrades on the Xiliarch. Probably my favorite one, and the one I was playing with the other day, is Eternal Discipline, and it gives the unit untouchable, so your reroll your defense rolls of 6, and it just ups that, if you're defense 5 at the right time with your Praetorians, it just even ups their survivability even more. And then they also have the, I'm not going to try and say this rule, but for 15 points, your unit gets the bodyguard rule, so if you have that Xiliarch that you don't want called out in a duel, you just put bodyguards on some Praetorians and he's good to go. He can just refuse all day long and not break the unit. And Long Lineage lets you get one additional character upgrade, which is pretty cool because you make some really, really offensive or a mix of defensive and offensive Xiliarch. Last, we'll take a look at the retinues that the Xiliarch can take, and he has Regalia of Dominion as his special Old Dominion one. Tier 1 of that is only 10 points, and the character stand that he's attached to gets +2 to its attacks. I take this a lot, just 10 points for +2 attacks in the character stand. It's pretty good, especially if he's given that unit line breaker, or if it's with a unit with a ton of attacks already. I don't mind paying that 10 points. It's when we start to get down a little further here that, I don't really want to spend 35 points for all these. This gives all character stands on the battlefield Regeneration 1, which is pretty cool, except for just the character. And usually if your Xiliarch, you're getting caught on a duel, you're either winning the duel or you don't really care because your Archimandrite's not winnable, who's going to die. So that's 15. And then last, when you get on the battlefield with a Xiliarch, you can modify all of your reinforcement rolls by 1, which is awesome. The only downside is you're paying 35 points for this on the Xiliarch, and he's coming in turn 2, so you're really just modifying turns 3, 4, 5. So you're not getting a ton of value from it like you would if you could go in a light unit. And then you also can take some combat masteries. You can tool them up completely with the combat to get +1 wound. You can get +1 attack to go to 6 attacks. And then you can have +1 clash and cleave 2, and then you saw some of the treasures you can give him to make him an absolute monster. But I just think some of those weapons, you can just pay those points for that, and he's got enough offensive output already. So really what I find myself taking is just this first tier of the Regalia of Dominion to give +2 attacks to a character stand when I have that extra 10 points at the end of my list building. And I almost forgot to talk about what the Xiliarch gives you if he's your warlord. Him and the Strategos are the two that, if you take them as a warlord, you can get to tier 4. So you can see tier 4, you need 22 or more tokens, which you can get to. I mean, I was playing just a 1,500 point game, and I was getting up there towards the end of the game anyway, so I'm sure a larger game you could definitely get there. And there's ways in Old Dominion that you can get even more tokens through upgrades and through a character spell and things like that. So tier 4 actually gives you a pretty good benefit where when you're attacking enemy regiments, they suffer 1 additional wound for each failed resolve of 6. I mean, it's pretty good. It's at the end of the game. Is it going to win you a game? Probably not, but you never know. It could push a bunch of more damage through. So those are my thoughts on the Xiliarch for Old Dominion. I really like him as a warlord. I even, have used him as just a character that can buff, and when he's not your warlord, he can just go in to give a unit of Praetorians line breaker, and they'll reroll 6s to defense. And for not that many points, he's a really, really good buff piece for the units that actually can put out some pretty good offense as well. So my next video, I'll probably do some more Old Dominion stuff just because that's what I'm playing right now. I got an event May 13th at Titan Games and Hobbies which I'm definitely going to bring my Old Dominion to. So I'm going to try and get them all painted up by then and see how they do on the table. Need to get some more practice games in, and I'll definitely let you all know how those go. Thanks for watching, and until next time, enjoy your games of Conquest.